just so it's here and I don't forget. Because there's a contemporary news story that is like struck me as like the most Homeric thing I've seen in like a decade. And I thought, going back through the Iliad a second time, it seemed oddly perfect as a news story. Actually, before we get into the actual Iliad stuff, um, why not mention it here, and then maybe Sam and Paul can comment on it if they drop in. But did you see the story that was going viral like yesterday of the Ukrainian soldier getting killed by the Yakutsk Russian soldier? Did you see
Yeah,
that video?
I saw it a couple hours ago, actually.
Yeah. I saw it yesterday and I was like, God, I hope they interview that guy. And then they did. And the story was nuts, like very intense. Apparently the Ukrainian guy killed one of his friends first, and then he went at it with him. And I don't know exactly how it got down to a knife fight, but I guess the Ukrainian guy actually disarmed the Yakutsk soldier, if I understood what happened correctly. But the Yakutsk guy was able to reach, it was like on the ground. He was able to reach back and grab a stone, basically. There was like a stone spike, and he like stabbed him in the eye, basically, with the stone spike. And then after that, he was able to get the knife and stab him in the back of the head. And then at that point, the Ukrainian guy's like, you got me, dude. I'm dying." Um, and then they both kind of rest for a moment, and that's when we get that dialogue. And it's very, very Achilles and Hector. Um, I thought like I wanted to bring up the dialogue. The best I could find is the mirror, which I'm sure I can find it better. The key line was, "I want to die myself. Thank you." Presumably there was some pause. So thank you. He said, "You were the best fighter in the world. Goodbye. You were better." Which is like, and I guess he says, "That's it, mom. Goodbye," like to his chest camera. And then I don't know if it was him. I don't know if it was the Ukrainian fighter or if it was the Russian fighter that dropped the frag. Um, I assume it was the Ukrainian fighter going out on his own because he said, "I want to die alone." But it could have been the Russian guy kind of giving him a kind of coup de grace because it didn't look like the body cam was moving that much. So I'm not sure who delivered the grenade, but it was just such an extraordinary moment, such a poetic moment in an otherwise drone dominated conflict.
Fact.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was borderline hard to watch the first time. I think just it's different reading it than seeing it than like, someone acknowledging their death is in front of them. Uh, but
Yeah.
but acknowledging the other man was a better fighter. I did, yeah. That is Homeric in a sense because that is a common theme within the Iliad.
Yeah, well it was horrible until the pause. And at the moment where he's just sitting there and the Russian guy is next to him and like clearly relaxed, it's this it's this very strange, like, it's just to borrow one film analyst's description of Hayao Miyazaki films, it's like this strange breath between the action. And it's in that breath and that pause that you that allows for the reflection of the Ukrainian soldier and the commentary there. And like I wonder, a number of things were going through my head in the shower, like as I was thinking about this before coming on the call. Like first of all, like would the Ukrainian soldier have had the presence of mind to make that comment had there not been a pause like that? And like probably not, but like I don't know. It was just a thought that came through my head. And then the other thing that was coming through my head was obviously like, you know, what made him say you're the best fighter in the world? Like that's a very maybe this is something unique to the Russian language, or maybe this is, or maybe it really was that grand of a statement. Like, is that
I
a
mean, as dying words to that guy who's now dying, the guy who just ended his life is the best fighter in the world to him. And also, I
yeah?
mean, keep in mind his adrenaline is probably through the roof.
Well, yeah, the phenomenology of it was in my mind. Like either that's some just Russian colloquial phrase, or he was the intensity of the experience, the pain, the seriousness, the urgency of that situation narrowed the world and intensified it. Um, and you get that sense in, and I don't want to demean Achilles because I think at a deeper level there's nothing demeaning or diminishing about this. But like when Homer describes Achilles as like the greatest fighter in the world, is it in this intense, like viscerally involved in the life and death experience of life sense that he's saying that? Um, and I hope that it is, because I think there's a sense suddenly where if you get too broad and like too objective in your perspective, then it loses a degree of connection and like vitality in some way. I don't know. I'm kind of just saying words at this point, but um, this is all.
So you might be onto something with the world narrowing. Have you trained martial arts
Mhm.
before? So you
Not in a
know.
long time, but
Okay.
I got my black belt at 16 in like Shotokan karate.
Okay. So you remember sparring though, right?
Oh
Like
yes, those
when
I
you're in,
yeah.
or if you're doing a competition match, but if you're in an intense fight with somebody, how big is your world in that moment?
Oh, it's completely focused. You're
Exactly.
in the zone.
Yeah, all you're thinking about is your next move and stopping their next move, right?
Yeah.
So that I mean that could be relevant as well if you think about scope, especially for the Ukrainian. Now with Achilles being claimed as the greatest fighter in the world, I would wonder if that scope is a bit more broad.
Yeah, maybe the poet is not like the role of the poet is not the same as the role of the soldier, and perhaps the perspective of the poet is not the same as the perspective of the soldier. But the Homeric rhapsode is different, um, because he is he is first of all he's channeling the muse, right? Sing through me, muse, daughter of Zeus, blah blah blah. But one gets the sense and one hopes that it's not only the muse that he's channeling something like the the spirit and the understanding of his time and the people of his time, and which would include an a first-hand understanding and appreciation for what it is like to see someone, get their hip crushed by a giant stone and scream, and their eyes go black as their armor clatters about them, or however the phrasing goes. Um, like one would think that someone who has not been in war and seen it firsthand would not describe it in that way. I don't know though. Like this, I haven't been to war, so I,
Yeah, yeah, same.
I've seen a lot of live leak videos, but I don't think that's not the same. You're not there. You're not smelling it. You're not seeing it. It's so weird. I've been to two house fires now in the last like 2 months. Um, like after an apartment complex burned down, and then some very weird Ukrainian guy, a bunch of sex dolls in his house, very strange. His house burned down, partially, self-installed solar panel situation. And like I was burning some MDF in my backyard, just like a bunch of old wood shelves, and I had come to develop a sense of burnt down house smell. And I didn't know what it was. It was just like it was a smell that I'm like, oh, this is what burned down house smells like. Um, Walking through those apartments and through this guy's house. And then when I was burning the MDF in the backyard, I'm like, oh, that's what it is. It's MDF. It's that compressed like coated chipboard stuff. Not OSB, but that like hard um like IKEA furniture board, you know. And I'm like, that is. I didn't know what that was before, but that's what burned down homes smell like apparently. Is burnt MDF. And it's just an extra sensory component of the experience of being in a burned down house. And I'm sure people would sense that while their house is burning down too. And I'm sure war is like that. It's got these extra layers of sounds and smells and you know adrenaline that you're not getting just by watching a video.
I suppose it is possible that Homer had at least some experience with war.
Yeah, I mean, it was not an uncommon thing. Jack sent me this excellent essay, Turbulence Substack. Let me bring it up real quick. It was I'll skim down to the section. Aeschylus, the father of tragedy and the first titan of the theater, fought as a volunteer hoplite at Marathon and considered this the only achievement worth mentioning on his gravestone. Blah, blah, blah. Sophocles, the second in the trinity of theater titans, served as a volunteer hoplite and rose to a general's rank alongside Pericles in the Athenian war against Samos. Meanwhile, Euripides, the third theater titan, served as volunteer hoplite in the Athenian army during the Peloponnesian War. Meanwhile, the great Socrates served as a volunteer hoplite in the same war and distinguished himself at Potidaea, Delium, and Amphipolis. During the panicked Athenian rout in Delium, he stayed back to cover his unit's retreat and saved Alcibiades' life. The great Plato, another student of Socrates, was first famous as an all-Greek pancration champion. Yeah, but he didn't go to war, I don't think, but, martial arts, basically. Xenophon, another student of Socrates who fought as a hoplite mercenary in the expedition of the 10,000 ships in Persian Asia Minor. Um, Now, that's all later. Obviously, we're talking like, 450 BC or so, as opposed to like 800, 850, whenever um, Homer was around. But like, that's a lot of artists that were involved in war, like a lot. Um, so it wouldn't surprise me if Homer had also had some experience there. And I love bringing this up when Paul's around, but the T.H. Lawrence self-justification for translating the Odyssey.
Yep.
Um, like, did he see something in Homer that made him say that? Because if it was just some ancient poet who was writing about war, like I don't know if an intelligent soldier would necessarily feel a connection with an artist's depiction of war. You run into that Plato's problem of the image maker versus the maker of the thing versus the real thing. Um, maybe T.H. Lawrence was seeing something in the Odyssey that was saying this guy has seen something that only warriors see. I'm just speculating. I don't
It would
know.
be interesting to ask Paul that what he thinks.
Mhm.
I mean, in the context of the time, how many military age men didn't go to war if there was a war to be fought? I mean, I think it was almost expected, right?
Not just expected. I think that's where you go to make your reputation. That's where you go. If you are a man of any ambition at all, if you want to be somebody, then you go to war. That's where you distinguish yourself. So I would imagine most men of this. Have you read by any chance Nietzsche's Homer's Contest
No,
essay?
not yet. Mm-mm.
It's really good. It's really short. Um, it's like very early Nietzsche, so it doesn't have his. He hasn't refined his like pithy like aphorism style yet. He's still like writing in proper paragraphs and so forth, which is nice. Um, but he basically says like the Greeks were more competitive than other people. And there are all kinds of dangers with this, but basically the athletic contest, sports ball, so to speak, was like the salvation of the Greeks because it was this opportunity to give a productive and non-destructive outlet for this competitive energy and to maintain that competitive energy because it's so powerful. You can do so much with it. But uh if you either let it play out in war and blood feuds, it's obviously very destructive, or if do do athletic contests, but if you let some individual dominate it too long, then it loses its viability as an outlet for this competitive energy for everybody else. So there's like a tension there. And I don't know, it just seems very relevant to this. I kind of lost track of how we got there now, but
Uh,
yeah.
expectation of going to war to make your name was kind of where we
Oh,
were going.
oh, yes, 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 that's right. That's right. So like if a very competitive people in a very competitive people, and you see this in the in Homer's writing directly too. You see like everyone's always bragging and making boasts about themselves and their accomplishments and so forth. Like that strikes me as the kind of people where if you can go to war to make a name for yourself, you probably will. Um, I don't know.
Sidebar question. A lot of people claim lineage of the gods. I wonder if that
Mm.
was a sort of boast
Mm.
it was like a status boast.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah, I mean, you think with like Achilles that like, okay, he's the greatest fighter in the world. It makes sense that he's basically a demigod. Um, but a lot of people claim
Yeah, there are a
lineage.
lot of others.
Yep.
And some of whom were not even like that special. Like was it Sarpedon?
Hmm.
Wasn't he like a son of Zeus? And Ares had a couple of sons that died.
Yep. On the
And
Trojan side. Yeah.
yeah, there were a number of like kind of throwaway side character demigods.
Yeah, which is interesting because like another son of Zeus, Heracles, right? Who is
Yeah,
the polar opposite of a
the
throwaway
greatest of the
demigod.
great heroes. Yeah,
Yeah.
but then you look at Hector. Hector is no demigod. You know,
Yeah, and
um,
he's a glorious fighter.
pure mortal, but uh, uh, dare we say daimonisos, approaching the level
Mm.
of these and maybe even surpassing some of these demigods. So,
That was one of the ones that stood out while I was reading. What's the phrase? When Diomedes is fighting Ares, or is it Ares, or is that mixing up
yep,
my name? I do that. Okay, and it's the phrase that Naj pointed out. He becomes like a god.
daimonisos, yeah, equal to
Yep,
a superhuman force, as
that's what it was. Yeah, okay,
Nas
that's what you were
translates it.
saying.
Yeah,
That's what sparked the
because
memory. But I that
daimon, the way I remember is daimon is etymologically related to the daemon that Socrates references, this voice that tells him no when he is in danger of saying something that isn't true, um, or that he doesn't believe. It's this supernatural spirit. It's not necessarily a god, although it could be a god, but it's like a broader category. And I'm sure that's etymologically related to the later Christian concept of a demon, which is inherently evil. But like the daemon or the daimoni, which is referenced here, is much older, is much more neutral and like I'd say neutral to positive. Like it's just an expression of power and greatness and divinity. Um, but could be, and I mean, he didn't just equal some vague superhuman force. He equaled and surpassed an actual god, like a
Yes.
named Olympian, which is you know pretty hardcore.
And
Um,
drew blood.
yeah, if my recollection is correct, Naj actually describes the what Ares goes through is a kind of ritualistic mock death in a way. Like he actually goes through the process of dying. He doesn't die, obviously, because he's immortal, but what he goes through and goes back to Olympus after is the basically the experience of death,
Okay.
um, which is very odd. And I don't remember Naj's the full explicit explanation for why Naj interprets it that way. I'll have to go back through that. But it was very I think that was that in the Daimon Ethos section? Might have been. This
Probably
where
it
he,
would make sense because
yeah.
that's where he discusses this scene of Diomedes and Ares fighting.
Hmm. Yeah. And like at the experiential level, that brings me back to the Ukrainian soldier. Because for him to say you're the greatest fighter in the world, like what must he have experienced this Yak I don't know how to conjugate that. Yakutskian, that Russian soldier, like what must have the experience of fighting this Russian soldier been like? It must have felt like he was up against something greater than a normal human.
Yeah.
One also imagines that for someone to say that because they were beaten, the Ukrainian soldier himself must have, at the very least, believed himself to be quite capable as a fighter. I mean, if disarmed the guy's knife, uh, that's that's not an easy thing to do.
Yep.
So, um, yeah, it's just a very interesting crossover, an interesting psychological uh, dimension to think about with all of this. All right, my I've written this now like a couple times to a couple of people, but my hope is that 500 years from now, when like history books are teaching ninth and 10th graders about the Russo-Ukrainian war of 2022, like their introduction to the war is going to be a poem that someone wrote about that knife fight, you know. Not some fucking FPV drone video. No one needs to see more of that shit. But like a a like Charge of the Light Brigade poem about that knife fight. That's what I want, the generations of the future to see first. Then they can see all the FPV drone videos.
Yeah. Make it
But
poetic first. Give them a grand story.
yeah, and not to glorify war because, the more you learn about the war, the more you're like, fuck all of this. This is awful. Um, Probably neither of those guys should have been there. But like, I mean, because that's the Trojan War too. Like, it's Achilles, line in the open. What the Trojans never stole my cattle in faraway Phthia. You know, we came here for you, you shameless one. Um, but what Homer is doing, and Homer is like, I think it's like the greatest artistic accomplishment in Western history, is he's like he I hope he's not just making beauty out of ugliness, but finding the beauty in the ugliness. And like I think there's always there's always bits of beauty in the ugliness. Um,
Metaphorically, finding light within the dark.
yes, yes, yes. And there are a number of people who say, "Oh, you shouldn't glorify a war." It's like, well, okay, understand that war is horrible. It's awful. The needless death and suffering and so forth. Granted. But what happens when you're no longer at war? Now you get to enjoy your mind-numbing 9 to 5 grind. You have lunch at gas station cuisine, and you work out at your shitty like mass gym pumping Muzak in. Then you go home and you've got another water leak to deal with, and taxes have gone up, and your mortgage is now 5% higher than it was last year because of some bill that passed that you never saw or voted on. Um, and it's just this layers of tedium and bullshit, and you haven't escaped from suffering just because you've escaped from war. And the
I feel
ability to like the ability to find beauty in ugliness, which is arguably, maybe it's not. I don't know. Like if you can do it in war, you should be able to do it anywhere. Maybe. Or maybe there's an intensity scale where it's like the greater the horror, the greater the possibility of beauty too, and then the mundane. It's just kind of like slightly pop. I don't know. Um, but it seems like a profound psychological failure if someone is unwilling or unable to find and appreciate the beauty where it presents itself, wherever it presents itself. Um, I just it I just loved the Homeric moment of beauty in this horrifically ugly war.
so first, I feel slightly attacked. 'Cause you described a good portion of my life here with the 9 to 5. I do eat better than gas station food, and I have my own garage gym. Thank you very much.
Well,
But
then in that case, I'm describing myself more than you. Uh,
I'm just
I
joking.
I ate
Um,
gas station food more than I should. So,
I did have a funny, well, not funny. No, I had a thought along that lines about finding beauty in warfare, and I think we've always done that. I don't, and Homer might be an early instance of doing that, but my mind immediately thought of Marines raising the American flag at Iwo Jima.
mm,
That
yes,
was a prime example of finding beauty.
very iconic. Yes.
Exactly. In a very shitty war, where many people died. And everyone knows what that looks like. Probably everyone can recall the imagery of that when you say it because they did exactly that. They captured a moment of beauty to the American people.
Mhm.
So I think we've always done that. And it's not to necessarily to glorify the war itself, but I think to glorify those who fought bravely. And maybe that is part of the beauty.
There's like there's an opportunity for a Homeric appreciation of the Japanese soldiers that have been found on those islands that like
Oh yeah.
didn't stop fighting for like 25 years or whatever. Like there's a I mean on the one hand it's like kind of Don Quixote-esque. It's very like from the perspective of the winning side knowing the outcome and so forth. It looks like crazy. But I don't know, there's something still admirable there.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Admiral is the
and
word I was gonna go
yeah,
with too.
it's and there's something we can look at and be like, yeah, I like we're still gonna like try to help you, but appreciate the dedication and the loyalty there. And it's like this is a this is definitely the warriors of the nation that grew up with that who is that Akita whose owner died and it kept going back to the same train station to wait
That
for him for
was
like
also
17 years.
Also Japan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. These are the soldiers of the nation that venerates that kind of behavior.
Mhm.
And create statues to that. There's yeah, there's a lot to say about the Japanese to Homer connection, um, beyond just Hayao Miyazaki's film, which is a little bit more explicit. But I think there's more going on there too. Maybe someone will read some of Yukio Mishima's stuff. One of which, a couple of his story novels, I think, are direct retellings of Greek tragedies. I don't think it was Homer specifically. I think it was like Aeschylus and Euripides or something. But
Slightly related. My fire is about to read Dokudo. It was
Dokudo.
Dokudo. It's written by Musashi.
Oh,
It's a short book kind of on the rules of the samurai. That's our current selected book for January.
is this the same as the Book of Five? No,
No. Mm-mm.
the path of aloneness, the way to go forth alone. Oh, interesting. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Depend on a partial feeling. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world.
I kind of
Musashi.
thought this is like it reminded me of the Havamal when I
Yeah.
started digging into it. I was like, oh, this would be interesting. It should be like a short read,
Do
like
not
kind of like
regret.
rules for life.
Never be jealous. Never let yourself be saddened by a separation. Resentment and complaint are never appropriate. Don't be guided by lust or love. Hmm. Interesting. And all things have no preferences. This strikes me as like stoic.
It does, right?
Be indifferent to where you live. Do not pursue the taste of good food. This is like, I think this is actually going beyond stoicism. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Diogenes of Sinope.
How so?
The in all things have no preferences. Do not pursue the taste of good food. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. Um, are you familiar with how Diogenes lost his drinking bowl?
No, I don't know the story.
So Diogenes was famous for having no possessions, except he had a drinking bowl. Um, because you need that to drink water. And he was one day he was at the well and he was or at a pond or something to get a drink of water, and he happened to glance over because he was like homeless by choice. He was vagrant, like masturbate in public and like
Oh,
shit like that.
I do know who this guy is. Yep.
Yeah, this is the Alexander the Great get out of my son guy. Um, but he was about to drink water when he saw a young boy came up and he cupped water with his hands and he drank it. And in that moment, Diogenes realized, oh, I don't need this bowl after all. I thought I needed it, but I don't. And so he got rid of it. And so he owned actually nothing at that point, and he just begged. And the rumor is the legend, I should say, is that he died in his 90s because he decided to die, so he held his breath. That's the legend. That's the legend.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. Do not act following to customary beliefs. So much of what Diogenes did, like the masturbating in public, was not because he was just insatiably horny. Um, he was doing that to like specifically to violate customs. Um, it's like what like sociology 101 students do on college campuses, like sleep in weird places and um do not collect weapons or practice with weapons beyond what is useful. Do not fear death. Do not seek to possess either goods or fiefs for your old age. Respect Buddha and the gods without counting on their help. Abandon your body, but you must preserve your honor and never stray from the way. Okay, so interesting. Yeah. Very ascetic.
I'll keep an eye out for anything that strikes me as Homeric.
Yeah. I mean, it seems just on its face, reading these, it seems like a quite a departure from the Homeric um concern for personal honor, for like glory and kleos and all that. I mean,
It Samurai culture didn't glorify personal glory, if I recall. It wasn't like a main theme for them, but what about Japanese culture as a whole? Samurai is this, it could be basically be a separate thing from
it was very duty oriented.
mm,
Um and very like honor there's a very particularly Japanese sense of honor, which is wrapped up in duty, but it's not without its sense of personal reputation. Um, and like a lot of the seppuku suicides were motivated by a sense of not being able to bear living in dishonor. And so like and that dishonor was personal, you know. They're not killing themselves to restore their lord's honor. They're killing themselves to restore their own personal honor.
mm.
So it's not without an individualist strain, but there's not the sense of seeking almost godlike fame and reputation in a positive sense in the way that the Greeks seem to be. Um, so yeah, there's some crossovers, but uh, there's also a question of like, you know, how representative of Japanese culture as a whole was Musashi. Um, because you know who Musashi reminds me of in contemporary um Chinese culture.
I don't know anything about
Mm.
contemporary Chinese culture.
What's his name? Zhu Xiaodong. Have you heard of this guy?
Nope.
Oh, you should look him up. I'll type his name in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know how to spell Zhu Jiaodong. It could go a lot of ways for
I
me.
believe it's that.
Okay.
Um,
Pasta.
yeah. He is a Chinese MMA fighter. Um, kind of similar to Bruce Lee in many ways.
I have
But
seen him.
he's a journalist that just went around just beating the shit out of ancient masters, basically.
I've seen his videos.
Yeah. And he got massively canceled by the CCP. The CCP hates him. They like took away his traveling privileges. Whenever he would do a fight, they made him wear face paint so that which like in the West we're like, oh, that's cool, that's badass. It's like no, in China that's like so people can't recognize you. It's to kind of occlude and obscure your face so that you can't win personal honor. It's like it, they're like they're doing the soft censorship. Like they're not killing him, they're not getting rid of him, but they're definitely throttling him
Yeah.
in weird ways. And so it's like, is Zhu Xiaodong like expressive of the values of China? Well, I don't know. There's certainly that strain there because Bruce Lee didn't come out of nowhere either. Um, and there's similar philosophy there, and there's something similar with maybe there's something similar with Achilles. If Agamemnon represents convention, um, as Greg Nosh sort of puts it, the best by convention, or as Achilles is like to hell with convention in the way that uh, Musashi says. Do not act following customary beliefs. And Bruce Lee was like, to hell with tradition as well. Follow what works.
Mhm.
So maybe that's the persistent attitude in all of the greatest. I mean, we're having to interpret rather metaphorically with Achilles, of
Yeah.
course.
But I
But
mean, it's a reasonable mindset. If you're going to become the best, you're going to do what you need to do to get there.
yeah. Well, but there's a what I always thought was slightly misleading about Musashi's approach, um, and Bruce Lee's approach, because we all see, Bruce Lee and Musashi and these other guys at their peak, and they're like, disregard tradition, follow what works, and do all this. And it's like, well, but how do you know what works? And in order to get to these places, to get to this level where you can disregard tradition, as this is very true in writing, all of the best writers completely disregard writing convention, right? Um, but they get there by learning the convention, if that makes sense. So it's like they have to master the convention before they can disregard it and still have something that works. Um, actually, I think this is like Nietzsche's metaphor of the uh, the camel that becomes the lion that becomes the child.
Yes, I remember that.
I think that's this. I think it's very dangerous if you are a camel to hear the advice of the child and think, "Oh, I can just do whatever without having to carry the burden first," you know. Um, so it's the right end place, but yeah, that's
You have to take the right steps to get there.
right. Like it is good to train in formal martial arts to create a foundation. So then when you reject the foundation later, like why, and you also know why the tradition was the way it was and what the good stuff from the tradition was. Um, because I don't think Musashi or Bruce Lee or Zhu Xiaodong or Achilles perhaps are saying reject all tradition because it's tradition and like a rebellious uh negating kind of spirit. That it's more like, you know, sometimes what works is tradition, but often it isn't.
And you'd have to have some level of mastery before you decide to reject it.
Hmm.
Because if you don't understand it completely, you probably wouldn't have the grounds to want to reject it unless you're just, I don't know, like an angry adolescent or something. But
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm beginning to get to that place a little bit with electrical work. Like I'm beginning to develop opinions about things in the code. Like wherever the code requires GFCI protection, I'm like, yes, that's like very important. It is really important to have GFCI protection. Where the code requires arc fault protection, I get pissy and resentful and like this is fucking bullshit and this is like insanely expensive because an arc fault breaker is like $75 whereas a regular breaker is like 10 and arc faults are um as far as I can tell worthless. Um it's they're like and it gets more retarded every year. Because the people who write the code are the people who manufacture the parts. So
okay.
the manufacturers say, "Oh, you're required to do this to use this more expensive part that we make." Oh, but now with power surges, all our arc faults are failing because our arc fault breakers are really sensitive to surges in a way that regular breakers aren't. So now we're going to require mandatory whole home surge protectors, which are like $250, and take up 2 slots on your panel, in addition to having arc faults, which also take up more spots on your panel. So now you need bigger panels and arc faults and surge protectors to protect the arc fault breakers that you don't need. And we're just like, this is so much bullshit. It's it's maddening. And of course the customers have to pay for all this, but they don't know what they're paying for. They're like, God, this is so expensive. And um, anyways, that's a tangent.
I mean, I can relate in some sense too in my career field too, right? You start as you do it for a while and as you become more and more familiar with it, you start to understand it better, right?
Mhm.
Your God, are you drinking a Red Bull like now?
Yeah, yeah,
Good looks.
um,
I wouldn't sleep if I did that right now.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I do the same thing. Sometimes people get surprised. They're like, "Whoa, like you really think that?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like I work in cybersecurity. People think you have to be like, cross your T's, dot your I's on every single thing. Well, you'd be surprised. Not everything has to work exactly that set way. There's room for variability
yeah,
based on a number of factors. But you have to understand the basics before you can understand where that would be applicable.
exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
it's
do agree. I don't think they're saying throw out all tradition for the sake of just all tradition sucks like that. I don't think that's the message there.
yeah. Well, and there's also nothing bad, I don't think, as long as you approach it with some circumspection and some patience. There's nothing wrong with a camel, reading the perspective of the child and be like, okay, so this is where I'm headed eventually, you know. And I'm not going to jump ahead, but this is where I'm going to end up, you know. Um, and getting some sense of the map to come, um, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah,
I think
but I mean,
it
counterpoint, would you understand the perspective of the child as the camel? It might be so foreign that you're not
probably,
quite there yet.
no, you wouldn't, but the perspective of the child might prime you. So Matthew Crawford has this. It talks about this in The World Beyond Your Head. This theory of learning where um, you get told something and you're like, okay, but you have no frame of reference for understanding what you've been told, and you get told it a few more times, and you're just like, okay, maybe it even becomes annoying. It becomes this cliche that old people say, and you're just like, whatever. But then you have a close call of some sort. You have in a moment of emotional intensity and possibly pain, the thing that the older people were saying suddenly clicks. And in that moment, you understand the meaning of what they were saying before.
Do we not do this with our children to some extent?
We do, exactly. Um, and you wouldn't have necessarily made that connection had you not been primed, is the idea. So there's value in the priming, even if you don't understand what's being said in the moment. And that, incidentally, is my understanding of and appreciation of Greg Nage's notion of the Ainos that we see in the Iliad and in the Odyssey to some degree. Like where Nestor is telling his son how to win the chariot race at the end of was it book 22, 23?
Hmm. Yeah,
Um
right towards the
the
end. Yeah.
the Ainos is this cryptic story whose meaning is ambiguous, but is intended to be understood at some future point where the moment of decision arrives. And
Priming, like you were
the
saying.
exactly. And the question, of course, is like, why would someone be intentionally cryptic, right? And the answer I thought before, and the answer I actually wrote down in The Hero and the Man, is like, well, spirited, thumotic young men um, just will instinctively dig in their heels and push back against you. And with someone like Achilles, that's probably true. But maybe the bigger issue is because even if you weren't cryptic, they're not going to understand you anyway. They don't have the right frame, they don't have the right sets of experiences to understand it anyways. Um, when I read the Book of Five Rings, I'll be honest, I didn't understand a lot of it. Like I understood what he was saying, but it was like that. It was like hearing people say they grew up so fast, you know. Um, which is my favorite go-to example of like this kind of phrase that like you don't know what it means unless you're already there.
Well, that's why I smiled when you said it. It clicked
Yeah.
right away. I'm like, oh, yep, totally get
Yeah,
it.
but you wouldn't get it if you hadn't heard they grew up so fast, probably dozens if not hundreds of times growing up when you
Oh,
didn't know what it meant.
probably hundreds of times. Yeah,
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's a good point, and it's a good analogy.
So maybe there is value in reading stuff we don't understand. Um, it was one of the reasons it's so fun to keep coming back to Homer at like different stages. This is sort of what Nicholson was talking about in the opening of the book. He's talking about having read it in high school and then reading it at a different stage in his life, and it like hits different when he's sailing in the Hebrides or whatever.
I think that's also the value of Homer, and probably many other books and great literature.
Probably many
Also,
books, yeah.
yeah, is that when you read it at a different point in life, you're gonna have a different perspective,
Hmm.
and you'll understand things you may have not previously.
Yeah, absolutely. And but not just understand it differently, but it primes you to understand your own life differently. It's that like two-way portal thing that Naj is talking about in book seven.
Yep.
Um, where it's framing you as much as you're framing it. But yeah. I should ask, how has been reading the Iliad itself been after all of this priming, after all this Nicholson and Naj and Brereton and discussion.
It's good. It's a fun read. I am enjoying the translation. I'm on book 9 now, so I'm
Nice.
not too far in yet, but definitely like stuff that we read in Ancient Greek Hero. I mean, totally just like sticks out like a sore thumb now, and I'm like, oh yeah, that. Like, so that's kind of fun. I did a little digging into the lion references, which was also
Oh
kind of
yes.
so there were yeah between the Odyssey and the Iliad for Odysseus specifically, they're worded very differently,
Hmm.
which is interesting. So then I kind of went
Hmm.
through, and as I was reading, actually specifically books 6 through 8, because it's all battle.
Hmm.
I saw the lion reference a couple more times, and I think it was the purpose is to demonstrate someone's like martial prowess. When they're entering the battlefield, those who oppose them are like lambs going to the slaughter in front of a lion, is essentially the
Right.
gist. Um, and then I have it on Kindle too, so I just started searching, which is actually got kind of long because Ilion has lion in it. And I don't think search operators work very well on Kindle, but
Right.
I did find actually a number of references in the Iliad specifically to a lion, and they're all in the same context
Hmm.
of basically someone going into battle, and it's almost a sign they're going to be the victor. They're going to be the
Okay.
one doing the killing.
So it's like poetic animal foreshadowing.
Correct.
Interesting.
Which was is kind of cool. So now every time the lion sticks out like a sore thumb every
No,
time I see
where
it now.
where is Agamemnon's Aristeia?
Shoot,
Is that book like 12?
I don't recall.
I wish I had Fagles in front of me because Fagles actually labels the.
The Aristeia itself.
Yeah, 14. Nestor was drinking. That's when Patroclus gets involved, I think. Book 12. Menoetius, Earthshaker, Hector. Because 10 is the night raid. 9 is the embassy to Achilles.
Which I'm also looking forward to now after Naj.
Yeah. Atreus' son roared his command to the Argives to gird themselves, and himself among them now donned the gleaming bronze. His greaves first he fastened. Okay, Book 11. We have the arming up sequence, which is like its own kind of foreshadowing. Or 10 bands, where it's describing, unlike two whole paragraphs of poetic description of him arming himself. This is Agamemnon. So I think Book 11.
Okay.
Insert hefted his fine shield, all protective, richly inlaid, battle hungry. Around it ran 10 bands of bronze, and on it were set 20 bosses fashioned of tin, gleaming white, and a single central one of dark cobalt encircling the Gorgon with her menacing features, glaring horribly, flanked by terror and panic. Heights of the airy sky, he sent down raindrops dripping with blood, a sign of all the brave heads he'd soon dispatch to Hades. They were sent by Zeus. So I wonder if there's any lion references at the beginning of 11. So I'm kind of trying to speed read for it. I'm not seeing any
Oh, let
offhand.
me let me pull up. Uh, the one thing I was really disappointed in is that in the Kindle versions of both Peter Green's Iliad and Odyssey, um, does not differentiate the books so that you can
Yeah,
go through it easily. So
yeah.
yeah, all right, I'm at book 10 now on the search page.
Yeah, book 11 is absolutely his Aristeia. Like on page 3, we're like into it.
Okay.
So we don't get a lion metaphor before he starts murdering everybody, but we might get one towards the middle or like towards the end, because usually the Aristeia has like some culminating moment. Python
That
just
was,
has a chariot with spear thrust at the chest.
so you're looking at book 11?
Yeah.
Okay. So, there's a line reference.
Oh,
Line 545 area. So what you're talking about?
that's
Wait.
towards the end.
No, this is it. That's with Ajax. Actually, it's not. So Ajax is referred to as a tawny lion.
Like a wild beast, it says. Oh, a tawny lion's driven off from their oxen steading. Yes,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. See, there's other line references in
So
the same
this is
chapter.
where is this after Agamemnon gets injured and then sent back?
Let me see, because there's also a reference on page 212, which is two pages before.
Saw the Trojans being routed in disorder.
Oh, Odysseus is referred to as a lion on around line 480.
Shrewd Odysseus, that man of many wiles, pressed a crowd of valiant Trojans, but the hero charged out with
Or,
his spear, fended off.
one line up.
Oh, but some spirit directs them, a ravening lion. The jackals scatter, it scoffs their prey. So now, round shrewd Odysseus, that man of many wiles, pressed a crowd of valiant Trojans. I see. So there's a number of line references, yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, I have to go back now because am I remembering correctly that Agamemnon has his Aristeia, but then he gets injured? Yes, yes.
I haven't reread this part yet. I'm thinking back on Menelaus because he gets injured. But that was earlier on, book 6 or 7.
Someone down. Agamemnon continued to range just as the line of blood still flowed, warm from the wound, but from the moment the wound drying up, the blood flow ceased. Sharp pains began to weaken the powers of Atreus' son. just as keen darts target any woman in labor, the piercing pains sent by Aletheia, spirits of hard childbirth, Hera's daughters. My friends, leaders, and rulers of the Argives, it's up to you now to keep far from our seagoing vessels the grievous business of fighting, since Zeus the counselor will not allow me to war all day long against the Trojans. And then he withdraws. Okay, so even though it's technically his Aristeia, it would make sense not to analogize him poetically to a lion if he's about to get injured, if the lion is foreshadowing. Although I think we have to be careful with that. It might just be a useful poetic device. I don't know. But like
Maybe.
it would still work with your theory of like here again, Odysseus is referenced to as a lion in book 11, as well as in book 10. It still fits in with the Odyssey lion reference in book, is it 22, 21, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Right
it
before he
still fits in
begins the
with,
slaughter.
yeah. So
Yeah,
interesting.
I could spend some more time with it too. I just happened to notice because I brought it up that it's used a lot,
Hmm.
but the context is similar almost every time. And
That could be its own small little like essay thing. Yeah.
yeah. And in book I think it's still a book 11, Paris actually calls Diomedes a lion
Oh, interesting.
after he shoots him in the foot with the arrow. Yeah, which I thought was interesting also. I guess
Very interesting.
acknowledging his capabilities in battle in a sense.
Nice. It's always nice to see that, and it's especially it feels especially meaningful in the Iliad because most of the time that someone kills someone else is taunting.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I guess you're not going home to your wife tonight, faggot. Like, like Jesus Christ, dude. Uh, so it's like it's a little more intense when people are like, um, oh, you're clearly better than me or something.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, which sort of ties it back to the whole Ukrainian Russian fighter thing.
That's funny. I just thought of that too.
Yeah. Well, shoot, we'll have to yeah. I'll have to get further because I'm still I'm 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 kind of skimming it. I'm not reading it properly. I should go back and reading it. But it's always stuff like this that makes me want to go back and read it more carefully now. Like, where are the line references in here?
Yeah, I might be doing a
Stuff
bit of
like that.
highlighting this month
Hmm.
to see if I can come up with an actual theory on the intended use if it's consistent throughout the book.
Yeah, and like what is it poetically describing? Because that Odysseus reference in book 11 seemed to be comparing him not just to a lion, like, oh, he's like a lion, but like similar to the way in which a single lion can break up a pack of hyenas.
Mhm.
So that was what Odysseus was like when he broke up the pack of Trojans. Um, there's more to it than just a crude animal comparison, you know.
Yeah, and
It's
I
it's
mean
much more vivid in the action it is describing.
they're all kind of like that though, because they never
Mhm.
simply say like a lion.
Yeah.
Homer doesn't use it like that. Like what I have the one in front of me from Paris telling Diomedes. He basically says like, I wish I had shot you in the belly and taken your life away, because then the Trojans would have some relief from their troubles, who now tremble before you like bleeding sheep with a lion.
Yeah. And then in the Odyssey, when Eurycleia is describing Odysseus, or maybe was it Eurycleia or is it just the narrator's description of Odysseus? He's not like a lion. He's like a lion that has gotten into the flock pen, and no matter how much the shepherd boy cries and waves his stick, he can't stop the lion from tearing apart all of the sheep in a like frenzy of slaughter. Like is very, very like visceral.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's
This could also go back to that visual component we talked about last month,
yeah,
where he's essentially with words painting visual imagery for your mind.
yeah. And it's all it's all like actions. It's not
Mhm.
just like things. It's um yeah, it's fascinating. Well, man, I'm looking forward to your lion analysis. That seems really cool. And like it's not something that stuck out to me before, but now I can't unsee it. And it's like I want to go through and read it more carefully now. So,
Yeah, it's one of those fun little things you pick up for me as I'm reading this, it makes reading it even more exciting.
yeah, absolutely. And the that kind of poetic metaphor is like one of the hallmark beautiful aspects of Homeric poetry generally. Um, I don't know if you have any way of accessing. I think Sam might have shared them at some point, but uh, Bronze Age perverts Iliad uh, podcast episodes. But the metaphor that he chose was he was talking about the blood from some slain hero, and he compared it to the like he compared it to the like the clothing of white horses. And I man, I don't remember it now. It was just it was comparing it was poetically describing something gory and sad in like the language of something regal and beautiful. And that juxtaposition is very jarring. Um and memorable and very like somehow more visceral because of the juxtaposition. So I
Interesting.
yeah, I but once you see that technique pointed out, it's another one of these techniques that you see all over the place. Um, things that are sad being described in terms of things that are beautiful, and you'll see this in pop music sometimes. A lot of like sometimes a hit song will describe something beautiful or perhaps something pleasurable in terms of something sad or painful. Um,
I don't listen
I,
to
I
pop
can't think of a
music, so I can't relate.
yeah. Yeah, I can't think of a particular example. I'll find one.
Yeah, shoot it into the chat or whatever. I'm curious now.
Yeah,
I'd love to see an example of what you're talking about.
yeah.
Is BAP's podcast hard to find now or
It's called Caribbean Rhythms. I think it's on Gumroad. I think I can
uh,
download it and share it because I think I'm still technically subscribed to that. Um, no, I stopped paying for it, but I think I still have access to the things that I paid for while
okay.
it was up. I'll have to look. Do I still have Gumroad? Yes, I do.
It is on Gumroad, yeah.
I don't know.
It's impressive that you can remember the name of the podcast.
It's so counterintuitive. Caribbean Rhythms doesn't seem like. Do I still have access to this? Your membership is inactive. Darn it. I guess not.
Well, Sam gets a chance if he had it.
Sam might, yeah, Sam, if you listen to this, if you downloaded the Iliad, because I don't know if I ever figured out how to download it. It
Oh,
might actually be in here. Can we search? Oh, I found it.
oh, cool. Sweet.
Um, I'm just gonna pin it.
To the chat. Oh,
Oh,
nice. Oh, it's in there. Okay,
can you
cool.
see that?
Yeah.
Cool.
E- An audio file. Okay, let me
Yeah.
see if I can download it on my phone real quick.
Oh, I haven't done the Odysseus or the militarism one. I should listen to those. Crap. I did Homer and the Iliad. His reading, there's a section in that podcast where he reads like 30 lines of the Iliad in Greek. And it's
Oh,
not the
nice.
first line. He jumps to the end and he reads it in in the dactylic hexameter. Like he
Oh,
does it
cool.
correctly. It is very good. It's like the best reading I've heard. Um,
Nice.
so it's very fun. It takes a little bit to get over his like fake Russian accent. Um, I can give you if actually I will look this up real quick just because it's fun. If you want to hear his real voice. Um, Costin, Alan Mario, Bill Crystal, 2016. So this is his what Costin actually sounds like um when he's not writing as Bronze Age pervert. So he does have an Eastern European accent, but
Okay.
it's ridiculously exaggerated in his podcast. He's putting on this very performative, fake, half Russian, half Greek accent to sound like a weird schizoid. But he's funny. He's funny, um, but like very smart. Um, but the Bill Crystal thing is funny in its own way. So. Anyways, that should probably wrap it up for today. Uh,
Yep.
uh, well, we can come back to the Iliad um in February. Is that what we had scheduled? Yeah, we were doing the Iliad and then 2 months, then the Odyssey for a couple months, and then we get into our
Is it?
other books and then translation time. And then holy
So
shit, we're done.
yeah, I know, right? Your original schedule had
Yeah, what was the original schedule?
oh, December, January was Iliad, and then February, March was Odyssey, and then we read the next two books for the following 4 months after that, and then start translations in August.
Oh, fuck it. Let's stick with that then. We'll try to just push through the Iliad um quickly. Other guys can catch up as best they can. Um if and
They'll start the Odyssey in February.
yeah. I
Okay, so
think I think we'll
I'll shoot.
well let's come yeah, we'll kind of see where people are at, and depending on where people are, we'll either because I don't think anyone will have started the Odyssey by February. So I don't think it will make sense to talk about the Odyssey in February if people haven't even started it yet. Um, because you're usually kind of leading the pack. Uh, so I like let's plan on kicking things back 1 month,
Okay.
but not more than that. And we'll carry on with the Iliad and the conclusion of the Iliad in February, and then um Odyssey, which is a little bit shorter, in March, April, and then 3 books from there. And then yeah, this might take closer to the full 2 years than the 18 months I've been thinking. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how much time we
Um,
spend on translations too.
yeah. So I have a question based on what we've done so far. So I'm kicking off the second parallel group
Hmm?
uh tomorrow night.
Nice.
So this is Homer weekend. Um So, do you based on what we've done over the last year, do you have any recommendations as far as changes in timelines, changes in like content coverage? What I was thinking about is still doing familiarity speed run of Iliad and Odyssey for the first 3 months, 2 months for the Iliad, 1 month for the Odyssey. Um, and not even worry about just doing the details, but like just get through it quickly so you're familiar with the stuff. Um, but then I was thinking about starting with Brereton instead of Nicholson. Um,
You, I don't see why you couldn't. Baritone was such an easy.
yeah, I thought what Brereton does is more than anything else is he really like he's inspiring, and he like gets the imagination going, especially with that first lecture in particular, I think. And the other ones are great too, but like um it begins to give some points of reference, and it humanizes uh the story a little bit. And then with Nicholson, you get into some more like serious content and a broader academic introduction. And then because I realized in retrospect, doing Brereton after Greg Nage is just terrible. Like that's a real like letdown almost. I feel like Nage is something to graduate to, not to. Nage is not an introduction to Brereton, you know. Um, so that
Com
I was planning on flipping that order a little bit.
yeah,
Um,
that I can see that making sense. I could also stand up an argument for why The Mighty Dead could be done in a month. Also, uh,
okay,
2 months was too long for me. I think I moved on after a month.
and
I also
Nicholson is very quick reading too.
He is, yeah, and it's easy reading. Um, I
I feel
blew
like
through it.
six months is the right amount of time for Nage.
Yes, I think it did take me about 6 months. I had to take
Yeah,
breaks and then like think through what I read and then
yeah.
like maybe go revisit it and then yeah, that's not just something you sit down and just read through.
No, 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 no. So I think then now there is something to be said for a Nicholson Brereton Nage ordering because Nicholson is very broad,
Hmm.
whereas Brereton is like really niching into this kind of we're gonna take a Jungian approach, and then Nage is also intensely psychological. Like it's not historiological, it's not archaeological. It's very psychological and linguistic. Obviously, linguistic is a big part too, and a little bit. Oh no, it's got some history. It's got some anthropology there,
A little bit, yeah.
but it's mostly yeah. I would say it's mostly language and psychology,
And how
and
they
like
intertwine. Yeah.
yeah. So I feel like Brereton segues nicely into Nage, but Nicholson is still the best, like broad intro.
Yep.
So I think
I
that's what I'll
agree.
do.
I do think finishing the ancient Greek hero and then opening the Iliad will be a cool experience.
Yeah, that the I almost don't want people to. I almost want people to be kind of breezing through it the first time, so that when when you open it again after Naj and after Nicholson and Brereton, it feels like you're reading it again for the first time.
Mhm. Oh,
You know?
it's totally different.
Yeah,
You can't unread the things you read before
yeah,
you read it again. So you just
exactly.
notice so many more things.
Yeah, totally. Well, all right. I'm gonna sign off here. I'm gonna upload this to YouTube so that we can share it with the group.
Cool.
And yeah, we'll plan on finishing up the Iliad and introing into the Odyssey, I guess, in February, and then we will go from there.
Sounds good.
Sweet. Talk to you soon, man.
All right, man. Take care.